All right, so with that said, let me uh, go ahead and get started. So, hey to everybody, let's go ahead and started. If anybody does have questions, please utilize the chat. So if you need help with something, you can always ask myself or Caleb. And if you prefer to chat privately, that's fine, or you can just use the everyone feature on the chat as well. So either way. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Fortunately, I don't have any digital Sour Patch Kids to give out today, so hopefully we'll be in person soon. But long time no see. Glad to have some particular students back in the fold, so that's good to see. And on just kind of a tangent note, with classes, we've got a couple more weeks, so this week and next week, and then we'll be off for a couple weeks, and we'll resume in July. So in July, hopefully classes will look a little bit different, but we are not sure yet. So just keep in touch and make sure you keep posted on what things will look like, because as you probably know, things are changing quickly, and hopefully we'll be able to have a little more face-to-face interaction at some point this summer. So as a FYI. Okay, with that said, let's go ahead and start today's topic. So today's topic is talking about author's purpose and point of view. And so in social studies, and for that matter, reading and science, but all three of them, there's going to be a lot of reading material. And so these techniques and these types of questions apply across all three of those. So we're talking about point of view, that's pretty straightforward, right? Anytime we read something or watch something or absorb any kind of information, we need to make sure we take into account the author or the person who's giving you that information is telling you from a specific point of view, right? And so we just want to make sure we realize that and kind of keep that in the back of our brain, right? So when we read some of this social studies material, right, we want to be keeping that in mind, but also I want to talk a little bit about bias and propaganda, okay? Some words that maybe you're familiar with, maybe you're not. But when authors have a specific bias, that just means they have a tendency to see things from one point of view rather than another, okay? So, sorry, I'm just a little foggy this morning, but basically, it's rare that we get truly unbiased, right? And when things are attempting to be unbiased, they tend to be framed in a neutral way, right? So unbiased means looking at things from both sides and kind of leaving opinion out, right? So unbiased would take a topic and it would just present the facts, and it would say, some people think this, some people think this, and they would just kind of present it, right? Whereas if something has a certain bias to it, that means the author favors kind of one side of the argument or the other, right? They're not necessarily looking at it from a neutral state. So when we talk about propaganda, and that word has that's a strong word in terms of it conjures up a lot of imagery. Propaganda is just an extreme form of bias, okay? And the difference between propaganda and bias is propaganda is actually where you get the author or whoever is delivering the message, right, actually trying to convince people to think and act in a certain way, okay? Propaganda can be used positively, it can be used negatively. It tends to have a negative connotation. When we think of that word, we think of it as a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily have to, right? It's just a strong form of bias to the point where the author is trying to actually convince you to act and think certain way. Right? So again, that can be used positively or negatively, but just have that in mind. Okay. So let's look at some. Let's look at this example. Okay. So here's a paragraph. This paragraph is written from a specific point of view. Okay. So let's see if, as we're reading this, you can kind of start to see what I'm talking about. So, and then just before I totally forget, make sure that we're all signing into the classes. So in the chat, either just in the public chat or just privately to Caleb, since he's in charge of doing the attendance, make sure you are signing in with your full first and last name so we know who exactly is in class and we can give you. Okay, so let's look at this passage. Too much rambling on. Until the 1980s, most anthropologists mistakenly estimated the native population in North America at the time of Columbus's expedition in 1492 to be somewhere between 2 million and 7 million people. They based these estimates on the number of Native Americans alive at the time of their first contact with European explorers and settlers. However, the estimates ignored the impact of infectious diseases such as smallpox, which traveled much faster than humans did and would have decimated the native population before Europeans made contact with native people. So that is an informational paragraph, but it's written from a particular point of view. So here's an example of a question, right? What is the author's point of view about the population of North America in 1492? So is the author saying, one, that it was not exactly 2 million people or 7 million, but was somewhere in between those two numbers? Or two, that it was probably much larger than 7 million? What do you think? Based on the tone, based on the way the author is presenting the information, what they're trying to say, which of those two seems like? Is it between 2 and 7 million, or are they implying that there were more than 7 million? Okay. So when they talk about, so it's the key to the answer lies in this last part of the question, right, or the last part of the paragraph. However, the estimates ignored the impact of infectious disease, which traveled much faster, blah, 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 and would have decimated the native population before Europeans made contact. This author is arguing that a lot of Native Americans had probably already died from diseases before Europeans actually encountered them, right, in large numbers, which means, two, that it was probably much larger than 7 million. So that's the author's point of view. They're saying, even though it was estimated that there were about this many people, they didn't really take this into consideration, and the author is arguing that there were probably a lot more Native Americans than they first knew. Okay? So, now, the follow-up question says, which of the following words is a clue to the author's viewpoint? Okay? Ignored or estimated? Which of those two words kind of hints at what the author is getting at? And just to kind of spare you the suspense, right? Correct answer would be one, ignored, right? Ignored, if you ignore something, again, that's a strong word that implies that people either purposefully or ignorantly didn't take this thing into consideration that the author is talking about, right? So the author is saying that because everyone has ignored this issue, it was probably a much bigger number of people, okay? So again, the bigger takeaway and really the thing to take away from this whole lesson today would be read things carefully and with a lens for how things are worded, okay? Because how things are worded can give away the answer to the question that you're trying to answer, right? or it can help lead you to the right answer. So I think if of all this stuff that I've kind of rambled through this first 10 minutes or so, the big takeaway here is when you read a question, make sure you pay attention to how it's worded, the tone of it, and then same thing with the answer question, right? Because a lot of the questions are multiple choice. Take into consideration how the multiple choice answers, how they're worded, what words they use, and the general tone of them. Because again, that can give away obvious wrong answers and sometimes obvious right answers. So just take that into consideration. Okay, let's spend the rest of the time that we have today looking through some practice style questions. So those examples were a little basic. So let's look at something a little more complicated. So this is a good group of questions that deal with this passage and then this. So hopefully you can see this okay. It's not particularly the best high resolution photo, but that's okay. So the passage says, and I'll go ahead and read it. If you want to read it along with me, that's fine. If you want to read it by yourself, that's fine too. You can always ignore me or mute. So the paragraph says, during World War I, the U.S. National War Garden Commission began a campaign to encourage private citizens to grow their own food as a means of supporting the war. This practice became very popular. Increased private food production, the government could reserve much of the cheaper, mass-produced food for the troops. Money saved in feeding soldiers freed up resources for other military needs. In addition, planting war gardens, also known as victory gardens, gave American citizens a sense of empowerment. And then there's this attached poster from World War I with the title or the headline, "Will you have a part in victory?" And then down on the bottom, it says, "Every garden a munition." And then it has this picture of this woman in an American flag dress planting seed. So here's an example of propaganda, right? Not particularly negative, right? They're trying to influence people to plant war gardens, which then in turn help the country and help troops, right? But it's still propaganda nonetheless because it's biased to the point of trying to influence people to do certain things and act a certain way and think a certain way, right? So again, just an example. So I guess that explanation kind of gives away this first question, but let's look at it anyway. So the first question says, sorry, I'm bouncing all around. All right. First question says, which of the following best describes the poster's use of the word victory? Ambiguous, informative, propagandistic, or impersonal? All right. So a lot of big words. Tough question to answer if you don't know all those words. But you can start by finding words you do know and getting rid of them, right? Think of something doesn't seem to be right, then let's get rid of it. So informative, let's look at informative. So if something is informative, it means it's literally supplying information, okay? So is the word victory meant to be informative? No, I wouldn't say it is, right? Is it meant to be ambiguous? Do you know what ambiguous means? When something is ambiguous, it's unclear what the purpose is, right? The word victory is very purposeful. It means a certain thing, right? Victory implies winning something. So I wouldn't say it's ambiguous. So is it propagandistic or is it impersonal? Impersonal would be like the opposite of personal. And propagandistic means, is it trying to influence or persuade? So I would say that the best answer is probably C, propagandistic, because they're trying to appeal to people's sense of wanting to win, right? To be a part of the team, the winning team, right? And so they're implying that by planting war gardens, you are helping lead the United States to victory, right? So C would be the best answer here. Okay, I kind of gave that one away, but let's look at the next question. So number 2 says, what is meant by the poster's caption, every garden a munition plant? So again, vocab is a tough thing with social studies. Right? If you don't know what munitions are, munition is, you're going to be left to kind of guess. So I'll go over what munition is in a minute, but let's first look at the answer. A, war gardens require a great deal of time to cultivate. B, citizens who plant war gardens encourage a sense of community in their hometowns. C, citizens who plant war gardens help supply the war effort with essential resources. D, war gardens provide an excellent opportunity to learn about gardening, tanning, and food. Okay. So, back to the word munition. Think about ammunition. Okay. Ammunition is things or bullets that are needed for guns. Right? So munitions are supplies or things that are needed to munitions are not just ammunition, right? But munition is all the supplies that help, in this case, the army or the government or whoever, but they help run this. So their top munitions are like resources, or I'm trying to think of a better word, but supply. I would say supplies is probably the word. Okay, so they're saying by calling a garden a munition plant, they're saying you're basically building supplies for the U.S. Army, right? So which of those 4 things make the most sense? A, war gardens require a great deal of time to cultivate. No, I wouldn't say that's what they're getting at all. B, citizens who plant war gardens encourage a sense of community in their hometowns. Now, that might be true. That's not the reason that they specifically choose to call war gardens munitions plants, right? A munition plant means a specific thing, right? So it's not B. And for the same reason, it's not D. War gardens provide an excellent opportunity to learn about gardening, canning, and food drying. Again, that's probably true. They do provide that opportunity. That's not the reason that the phrase munition plant is chosen, right? The specific answer is because C, citizens who plant war gardens help supply the war effort with essential resources. So there's your answer. All right. And then number 3, the author's primary purpose in writing the paragraph accompanying the poster is most likely to. Okay, so now take the poster out of it because the question is dealing with just the paragraph. So the question says the author's primary purpose in writing the paragraph accompanying most likely to A, describe war gardens and explain their popularity in the United States. B, encourage patriotism and continued support for a strong U.S. military. C, distinguish the efforts of American citizens during World War I from those of citizens in other countries. Or D, to rebut the accusations of those who claimed that civilians did not do enough to support the U.S. war effort. Okay, so like we talked about earlier, think about the author's point of view. Think about the author's tone. Is it persuasive? Is it informative? Is it propagandistic? What is it? You know, where are they coming from? And what is the purpose behind what they're writing? Okay. So this is tricky because the poster is propaganda, right? The poster is biased to the point where it's trying to influence people to do things or act a certain way or think a certain way. But is the paragraph seem like it's biased or propaganda? I don't know, right? That's what I'm asking you, right? So I would throw out the kind of the first one I throw out would be C. Distinguish the efforts of American citizens during World War I from those of citizens in other countries. Other countries aren't even mentioned, so it doesn't seem to be the case that that's what the author is trying to do, and there definitely is no evidence to support it. So I would get C. I would throw out C first. Do you have another one that you might throw out? A, B, or D? I would probably throw out D. Rebut the accusations of those who claim civilians did not do enough to support the war. There's nothing in here saying that there were people complaining about citizens' lack of effort, right? So they're not trying to persuade you to say, look, people did help by planting war gardens, right? No. I would say the tone of the paragraph is just information, right? In other words, the paragraph's purpose is just to inform you about what? War gardens. Right? So I'd say, and correctly, some of you messaged me and said you would throw out C. The best answer here is A. And again, it comes back to the idea that the paragraph is just trying to inform you. It's not trying to persuade you. It's not saying one side is better than the other side. It's just saying these are what war gardens were, and they were very popular. That's it. Okay, so A. Let's look at one more question. And again, this deals strongly with word choice. So again, good practice for all three of the reading-based tests, right? Reading, social studies, and science. So question 4 is based on this dialogue here. And so Congresswoman Burns says, new organic food safety regulations are likely to increase the average cost of some food staples. The costs are justified, however, by the peace of mind that comes from knowing your food is safe and healthy. And then the concerned citizen responds to that by saying, rising prices are a cancer eating away at our families. High costs will drive people away from healthy foods and wind up harming our children's diets. Instead of buying wholesome natural products, parents will feed their kids fast food. Which of the following constitute quote unquote loaded words the concerned citizen used to support her point? A, high costs, B, fast food, C, a cancer, D, our children's diet. So a loaded word, think about what you would guess that, right? If a word is particularly loaded, it means it carries extra weight, or it's meant to exaggerate, or even more specifically, it maybe has another definition that's maybe being used a little bit different. So right away, the two easy ones I would get rid of would be A, high costs, and D, our children's diet. Okay, and here's why. What does high cost mean? It means literally what it says, right? If there are high costs, if food costs go up, then complaining about high costs is just stating the facts, right? High costs mean stuff is more expensive. That's what it means. D, our children's diets. Same thing. Our children's diets don't have some other meaning that might conjure up imagery of something else, right? When we talk about diets of our children, that's what we're talking about, what our children are eating. So A and D definitely aren't loaded words. Let's look at B and C, because what is a cancer? Literally, right? Cancer is something that eats away at our body and can eventually kill us, right? What is fast food? So I'd say both fast food and cancer tend to be loaded questions or loaded words. So if that's the case, which one is best? Because fast food can literally mean food that you get quickly, right? But fast food also does have a certain amount of stereotype, right? So fast food implies what? Healthy or unhealthy food. You think of fast food, the first thing you think of isn't healthy, right? Now, things have changed a lot, and there are lots of examples of healthy fast food. But the phrase fast food doesn't imply that, right? So I'd say fast food is somewhat loaded, okay? So if B and C are maybe both technically correct, okay, which one feels like the best answer? And for that reason, C is actually the best answer here because the citizen is using the word cancer to describe rising. That's an exaggeration. Right? Rising prices aren't literally a cancer. They're using that word very deliberately to relate rising food prices to killing people, right? Which is dramatic, but it's supporting the concerned citizen's point through use of an exaggeration or a strong word choice. If the concerned citizen would have said rising food prices are a obstacle, or rising food prices make it harder for families to eat healthy, right? If they would have phrased the sentence differently, it wouldn't have as much impact as saying rising prices are a cancer eating away at our families. Make sense? So that's all the time I've got for today. Sorry I was kind of all over the place today. Bear with me. Some days are better than others, and I especially feel kind of like I was talking in circles. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing or boring, and if it was, I apologize. I do my best, and I will continue to do so. So again, the next couple of weeks we'll kind of wrap up social studies and kind of restart here in a couple, or we will restart after that. So again, just stay tuned and make sure you are checking in with us about classes and everything else. And just as a side note, if you haven't already, make sure you're taking practice tests so you can really kind of see where you're at. With that, I'll sign off and talk to everybody tomorrow.